Soccer Today is powered by Spin Media. From podcast to video production, visit spinmediadigitalsolutions.com and bring your content to the next level.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, August 5th, 2022. I'm Kevin Laramie, and Duane Rollins will be joining me in just a second as we invite you to join our YouTube page, subscribe, and click that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast. Today on the show, we'll be talking about the latest in MLS news, looking at some of the transfers and transfer out in Major League Soccer over the last couple days. We will preview the big weekend in MLS, 14 games ahead of us. But first of all, Duane, how you doing today?
I'm pretty well. It's going to be a nice, bright, sunny, warm weekend. Can do a double again this weekend too, perhaps. So we'll see what Saturday brings us. Lots of fun things going on.
The doubles. We'll talk about Hamilton, maybe the debut of Hamilton in Hamilton. Jordan Hamilton signing for Forge. He was always destined to play in Hamilton, Jordan Hamilton, and that's an interesting signing for Forge. It's kind of fun. Also, what's interesting is over the next week, we'll have more on the CanPL when we look at this week. It's been busy. Next week will be also busy, but it'll be an interesting aspect. Speaking of your shirt, though, you have the 2017 MLS Cup champion. And a champion will be back in Toronto over the next few days. Well, he's actually back in Toronto already. Might even play this weekend. That's the first of our latest news in MLS. Let's go and break down the return of Richie Laryea to Toronto. So after a few months in England, well, I guess he did not become the sheriff out of Nottingham and back in Toronto for Richie Laryea. Doing the fit never really felt right with Nottingham. Outside of the signing, he had difficulties. He signed on in the offseason, made his debut on April 18 with Nottingham and never really was able to break through the starting 11. Back in Toronto on loan for the rest of the season.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to... Look, obviously, I'm a Toronto guy, and I've watched Richie Laryea, his best years in MLS, and obviously he was a big part of the team that you're talking about here. And moving forward, he drew that penalty in 2019, I should say. That's more the team he was involved in, where he drew the penalty to get them to MLS Cup final against Seattle, where they ultimately did fall, but certainly getting to finals is an accomplishment. So Richie's been a big part of TFC's recent successful times. It was exciting to see him go to Forest with the opportunity to play for a spot in the championship and maybe get to the Premier League. Never really got a chance. Now, a lot of Canadian fans are eager to suggest that maybe Forest didn't give him a chance. I don't know what happened over there, but the reality is he either didn't do what he needed to do to get that chance, or the club was blinded by something and never gave him the look. Either way, he needs to play. He needs to come back and play consistent minutes if he's going to be on the plane to Qatar, which has got to be Richie's idea, Richie's thoughts right now. He's going to come back. He's going to get 11 games with TFC. Probably not 11. He might not start this weekend. I wouldn't think he's going to have it. But yeah.
But of course, that's following the transfer out, or the loan out of Jakob Schaffelberg, who is now in the U.S. I think it's Columbus, if I'm not mistaken, that has signed Schaffelberg. So, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's Nashville.
Nashville, perfect. So Nashville has now Jakob Schaffelberg going forward for the rest of the season, which does liberate some space and give Richie Laryea some place to play. That would maybe help, and we'll see how Toronto handles their starting 11 going forward. Richie Laryea might find a way there. Maybe means Petrasso plays less. Probably. We'll see what happens there going forward. But now, that's just one of the news that came out over the last few hours. Let's continue, and this one is about Montreal, but it's a journey, it's an adventure, and nothing is confirmed yet. But according to MLSsoccer.com's very own Tom Bogert, last night he tweeted that according to his sources, Chinonso Ofor was traded from Chicago to Montreal for $325,000 in allocation. Chinonso Ofor is a striker, only played 3 times this year for Chicago. He is down the depth chart with the emergence of Duane, who is not related to the band Duran, just in case people were wondering. No relations here, of course not. And of course, Kasper Chibilko. So he was third in the depth chart in Chicago. Will that trade be confirmed today? Still waiting for more. It might not even happen. But according to Tom Bogert last night, this was done. This is probably a move for the future if it happens for Montreal. This is a striker that would be maybe in place of Sunusi Ibrahim going forward. The Ibrahim hasn't been working out so far, injuries and more, but when we're looking at the future, Bjorn Nordson won't be there next year, that's for sure. Maybe that's the striker in your depth chart number 3. But for Montreal, that would be a big amount of money maybe for a striker that won't necessarily have a lot to say this year.
Yeah, look, it's not a major deal. I think if you're a Montreal fan, you might have felt there's more of a move happening, something that really addressed the scoring, which I think has been the weak point for Montreal for most of the season. But
just to correct you, Duane, Montreal has the best offense in the Eastern Conference. So the scoring hasn't been a problem, but it's more the one striker. But yeah, so scoring is not a problem, it's defending.
Okay. All right. I still don't think Montreal has they've scored a lot of goals a couple times. Anyway, we'll let that slide for a second, but I'll let my opinion slide for a second. That's just my opinion. You can tell I'm Toronto boy here.
Statistically speaking, Montreal has 38 goals scored in the Eastern Conference. They're third, 41 for New York City and Philly. 40, Toronto has scored 30.
Well, I don't think Toronto's relevant to a conversation of good teams in the East right at the moment. So there's that. Look, regardless, the point is the move isn't necessarily boistering. It's not something you're going to look at as a Montreal fan and go, oh, he's going to put us over the top. As you say, this might be something they're looking down the line. It's a player that wasn't really playing. Maybe the Montreal staff sees something in him that others don't. We don't know yet. But, it's a move. And the money, too, was it 350, I think you said there?
325.
Yeah, 325. That sort of shows how much inflated the allocations are over maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where that would have been like, whoa, whereas now, you're seeing allocation trades in the million range, when you're talking about the MK deal and others that have been approaching that. So it shows that the money being spent internally is increasing, and I think that's a good thing for the league. I think it's a good thing. All these, you mentioned the Schaffenberg move. I think that's good that they've blown them out. Just that idea that they're using internal processes a little bit more now than they were in the past, I think is an indication of a maturing league.
Yeah, because of course they don't want to necessarily get rid of them for the future. They're just like, right now we have a lot of Italians and we have now Larea back, so we need to find a place for him to play without clearing the books forever. So it's a way to offload a salary and a spot in the roster for now. Let's continue our look into other news that took place, and this one might be, Duane, a underrated move, but Riqui Puig joins the LA Galaxy on loan from Barcelona. Riqui Puig, if you haven't heard, is one of the greatest little golden nugget that they do have in the La Masia, the academy of Barcelona. He is from Spain. He is born in 1999. He's 22 years old. He has played for Barcelona B and played 42 times for the main club Barcelona since 2018, 2 goals. He is a central midfielder, more creative but also defensive depending, but he's coming to LA to maybe change the perception that he's the late bloomer and show that he can play. It's been difficult for him to get a lot of games in the league. He played 15 times in the league last season, 14 the year before. He's a fringe starter for Barcelona. But if we can understand the past, it probably means that when he comes, he's not going to be a French starter in MLS. He's probably going to be influential very quickly. And I'm interested to see what a player that's been touted as a prodigy a few years ago could do in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Barcelona name has obviously taken a bit of a hit in the past couple of years in terms of what the players mean coming from there, but it still doesn't mean nothing. And you look at their financial situation and their desire to bring bigger and bigger names in to make a splash and to sort of keep up in the arms race with Real Madrid. They're going to have to find room, and they're going to have to nickel and dime in other places to make that room to register their players. If you follow the situation in Spain, you understand that Barcelona is up against it. It has to get rid of salary to add salary. It's very similar to an MLS team right now. So this could be a situation where they're looking to drop someone that they might not play a lot. As you say, when you're coming from a league of that standard into MLS, I think, and, just you look at the Italian side of things here in Toronto, you see those guys that come in there necessarily playing that do very well here. It's the same kind of thing. Now, this guy's a little bit less and more of a more unknown yet, I guess. in terms of whether he can consistently play. I mean, Blue Tableau, he went to Barcelona, right? And he didn't exactly come back and laid up in MLS again, right? So you never know.
Exactly. He went to B and never really went to Barcelona. This one actually was for Barcelona for 4 years. So Ricky Puig does show maybe a little higher ceiling, and he was developed over there. So there's probably less problem with training ethics, or just the ethic, the discipline in training.
Yeah, and I mean, we should be somewhat fair to Blue Tableau, who's having a decent season for Ottawa.
Yes,
but
he's playing very well, and he has a resurgence this year in the CanPL.
Yeah, and hopefully he gets to bounce back. I mean, the CanPL has that service too. But look, this is an interesting move for an LA team that's already pretty loaded. So yeah, the rich get richer, I guess, or the Galaxy we're talking about here. But it's LA. LA is always going to attract. It's a decent run, a decent gamble for them. He's the type of player that fits a Vanny system. It seems like a decent move on the surface.
All right, let's continue our look at some of the moves in MLS over the last couple of days. Eric Godoy has been waived by the Whitecaps. It was mutually agreed that both parties wanted to move on from this relationship, and the way to get out of this roster relationship was to be waived by the Whitecaps, which has been done. Eric Godoy has left Vancouver. Any thoughts on that move?
Just that he's a player that is sort of associated with the Whitecaps for a long time, and it certainly shows. It's sort of sad when a player that's been around a team for a while moves on. But look, they're trying to change their look a little bit there. The Whitecaps really haven't added much in this window, which sort of speaks to the issue we talk about a lot. But it is a good professional move to always find a way out to give this player an opportunity to move on someplace where he might be able to continue his career. But it's a guy that's put in a lot of days in this country for that team. So we wish him luck.
FC Cincinnati is finalizing a deal to acquire Matt Miazga from Chelsea. He didn't really ever play for Chelsea. He's been on loan forever. But Matt Miazga, formerly of the New York Red Bulls and MLS, probably will be back in Major League Soccer with FC Cincinnati. That deal will be finalized probably very soon. But Matt Miazga is, Cincinnati was first in the allocation order. Second was Dallas. And for Richie Larya's return to Toronto, Toronto had to pay Dallas to get that because they were third in that allocation order for reintroduction of U.S. men's national team and Canadian men's national team player in MLS. One of the roster mechanism that is not necessarily easy to grasp, but that's one of the ways where Richie Larya's return actually will cost more to Toronto than you would think, because they have to pay Dallas, which makes no sense. But we're talking about Cincinnati here, who was first on that order, and they will use that order to sign Matt Miazga, who never really got a fair shot. But sometimes the attraction of the bright lights of Europe versus what you can give to that European team are two different things. And Miazga's play maybe was always better suited for Major League Soccer.
Yeah, look, I'm never going to blame a player for taking that shot. Obviously, we all said it at the time. It was a strange move. If you go back to the archives, you can listen to us talk about it on this show. What was it, 4 years ago now? We've been doing this a long time, so you probably can go back in the archives and listen to it if you find it on our website. But yeah, I'm not going to blame a player for taking the shot. It didn't work out for him in this case. He had a little adventure in Europe. He's going to have an opportunity to come back and probably be a very important player for Cincinnati, a team that needs some defensive help. He was a good player. He's a very good defender in Major League Soccer. So there's no reason to think he can't step back in that. Quickly on the TFC thing, just so people know, they got $250,000 from Nashville for the loan of Schaffelberg, which they then spun to spend it. So they kind of just they lost Schaffelberg to trade back in is what they did.
The left pod give to the right pod to give to the other pod. That makes it all work. Let's continue our breaking down of these news over the last few hours. This one is Charlotte FC signing Nuno Santos from Benfica. If you are a big fan of Benfica, you're wondering, well, I haven't really seen him play for Benfica. That's because he's been on loan pretty much for a long time. He has some games with Benfica, 60 games over the last 5 years with Benfica. He was on loan to Paços Ferreira. Yes, you've heard that name before. That is where Steven Eustáquio used to play in Portugal before being sold to FC Porto. Paços Ferreira was a former club of Nuno Santos, who was loaned there. He was loaned to Boa Vista and Moreirense, all teams in the first league of Portugal. Benfica B was his main developing club. He even played for Porto. The guy played for like rivals in the youth academy. He must not have been really loved by other youth players. You know, when you do both academies in a couple of years, that stays on the pitch. I imagine a couple cleats and a few scars on the shins to talk about that. But Nuno Santos, a good young midfielder, 23 years old, coming to Charlotte to maybe give them a little bit of boost heading into the last third of the season.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have great deal of study notes on this young guy, but what I will say is I think it's an interesting signing from a Charlotte perspective in terms of the type of player that they're bringing in. I thought in the lead up to Charlotte's launch that they would be more of a Atlanta model, spending big money to bring bigger names in, but this seems to be that they're looking to bring a guy in that mid-range development guy, which is something Atlanta does too, in fairness. You bring the guy in at 22, 23, let him play 2 or 3 years in Major League Soccer, then move him again, and you can potentially make a good profit on that. And that is something that you're seeing more and more MLS teams try to do. It's going to be a difficult balance to have because you're going to bring a guy in that's going to become a fan favorite, and then you're going to flip him on. And whether you can get your fan base to wrap their head around that, it's pretty sophisticated in many cases, but you're going to have we have 60,000 people packing in stadiums down there sometimes. It's going to be a few that go, what happened to that Santos guy? I just bought my kid in Jersey. Yeah.
That's true. But Carol also found the back of the net for the second time in the last 3 games recently, so that's good. Now up to 7 goals this season after 2 goals in 4 games to begin the season. But Karol Swiderski cooled down and then he's back now in the scoring form. So we'll see how that continues to go for Karol Swiderski. Let's continue. There's one last news item I want to just talk about, and that is Aris Medunjanin, who was really important for FC Cincinnati a couple years ago when they started in MLS, and how quickly things change. They have now mutually agreed to part ways. Aris Medunjanin's time in Cincinnati is over. He has been shipped out of town.
Look, a sign of a good MLS team is a team that understands when it's made a mistake and is able to let go of that player before it gets too far on. And I think bad MLS teams often hold on to players and hope that they turn it around and come back from whatever they're in. It's rare that happens. So, obviously this didn't work out, but you move on, you find a way out, you find a creative way out, you get out of it. That's a positive development for Cincinnati. I'm not sure they would have done that in past years. They might have just spun their wheels. I don't know what Cincinnati was doing prior to this year. Seemed like the new management team, I think their third management team might have got it right. So as they say, third time's a charm. Getting rid of guys that don't work out quickly, that's a sign of a good MLS team. So way to go, Cincinnati, for getting rid of something that's not working out.
Yeah, and it's not working out now, but we'll just also make sure that we know that at the beginning of his time in FC Cincinnati a few years ago, Medunjanin was one of the best players they had in the midfield, but eventually Father Time is undefeated, and this is one of the last undefeated, well, not the last one, but undefeated again. How many undefeated people out there? Father Time and who? Even Goldberg lost, and like Hulk is not undefeated, so I think Father Time is the last undefeated person.
Yeah, Father Time is undefeated. Look, Christine Sinclair is really taking a role.
She's good. She's getting close.
Yeah.
So Father Time and Christine
Sinclair. 6th World Cup next year. So yeah.
Jeez, that's a record because Ronaldo is 5 and 6 would be the record.
I would think the 6 would be the record, both genders. I'll have to look that up. But anyway.
Yeah, because I think Ronaldo's the record with 5 on the men's side. It'll be interesting to note. But on that note, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at the games this weekend in Major League Soccer.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today as we say hello to a couple of great people that support this show for a long time, in some cases for years and years. Thank you for all your support and contribution over the years. Pierre, Patrick, Martin, Jordan, Ian, Gonzalo, Glad, Dennis, Daniel, Sean, and let's not forget, let's go Blue Collar Dan. Of course, you can join this great plethora of human beings by supporting us financially on our Patreon page, getting access to the two Solitudes Soccer podcasts. At the same time, you can do so on our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes. You get all the information, the different tiers, and you can join the shout-out tier and have your name mentioned during Soccer Today. Big weekend in Major League Soccer. Let's have a look at what's in store for Vancouver tonight. Vancouver starts the Eric Godoy-less era this evening by playing at home against Houston. Houston is, yes, they have problems. Houston, there is a problem. They started really, really well, but now they are in the bottom of the Western Conference. If relegation was something, they would be in trouble. Vancouver has an opportunity for 3 points tonight.
Well, yeah, you expect that they would be the favorite there, but I'll say this about Houston. I think that they brought the Pat Onstad in very late in the offseason. I don't think it's necessarily fair to judge Houston too much this year. They're kind of dealing a dealt hand, so we'll give them a bit of a break. But yeah, it's not a good team, and they're certainly not doing very well. It's based on last week's result.
No.
Particularly not.
Yeah, no. But they do have Hector Herrera, and he's going to be very good next year when they're around him. But he only needs one good look on goal. And he hasn't really scored yet, I believe, for the Dynamo. So it's always a trouble. And I wouldn't bet against him not finding the back of the net real soon. So that is also maybe something to think about this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, yeah, that's a sign. Like that came in after the signing happened. I mean, Pat Onstad came in, and within a month he was already over there dragging, dealing and trying to bring the DPs to turn this around. But they didn't get into the mess they're in overnight, and they won't get out of it either. It's going to take some work, and it's going to be some dark days before there's some bright days there.
Speaking of dark days, there's a great article by Charles Boehm, who a friend of the show. We had him multiple times over the years, and Charles wrote a great article about good teams on the line, great teams straddling the playoff line this year. Atlanta, Seattle are two of those teams, and Seattle has had a good win midweek, a 1-0 win coming from a Nicolas Lodero penalty. And if they can parlay that with another win this evening, Atlanta's not a good team this year. They're struggling, unfortunately. And yes, they have a better roster, but injury is really what is making Atlanta a bad team this year. It's not the roster, and it's not how they spend the money. It's because all the money is injured, basically. And we're going to see Seattle tonight, I think. The true Seattle, and if they're going to come back, it's now. And if not, we'll see very soon too. So I guess midweek was part of the answer. Maybe tomorrow, 3 p.m. is another part of the answer.
Yeah, look, Atlanta is a front-loaded team in the sense that they spend a lot of money on the talent players and don't necessarily spend it across the roster, unlike a Philadelphia, unlike an NYCFC, the teams that have been doing better of late. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's the answer. I don't necessarily think there's one right way or one wrong way, but the downfall of a front-loaded team is if you get a couple of key injuries, you're screwed, and that's been Atlanta this year. Seattle's a mystery. Obviously, they won the CCL. I guess they're going to have a World Club Cup to play for. I don't know. I've never heard confirmation on that. Who knows? But whatever. If there's one that happens, they'll play in it. So they have other things that they're thinking of, but I don't know whether they just haven't convinced me this year that they're going to have it. They remind me a lot of 2019 TFC, 2018 TFC, where everyone kept saying, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. What's happening? It's not happening. It's not happening. It didn't happen. That was kind of what happened there, and I'm not sure whether we're going to see the same thing with Seattle. Although, look, we say show me, don't tell me all the time. Seattle has shown us a lot. So Maybe it's tell me when it happens, don't show me. I don't know. It's something opposite.
He had his last match a few days ago, so we can... Obviously, of course, he has a complicated history, and I'm not going to dismiss this, but to be the man, you got to beat the man, okay? And Seattle has beaten the man before, so I'm not going to dismiss Seattle until they show us, and we'll see. Charlotte, Chicago, a battle that would be interesting. Chicago is kind of on the up and up once again, and I'm going to send it to the standings because they're on the up and up. Chicago is all the way to 10th, but just 2 points away from Charlotte in the 7th spot in the Eastern Conference standings. And that's surprising for a team that we're not necessarily expect a whole lot of it, but it's a muck in the middle of that table. That's why I'm glad for Montreal that they did get the midweek win, because they're more with the upper tier now of the Eastern Conference than the bottom. There's a couple of gaps, and the 6-point gap between the 4th and 5th spot, New York and Orlando, is big for the teams above. For the team down, that's the second tier. So I think we have the top tier, Philly, NYC, then Montreal, New York, then the 3 teams that will play in the playoffs but not host a game, Orlando, Columbus, Charlotte. And if playoffs would start tomorrow, Montreal will play Orlando. Montreal will play Columbus in Montreal, which would be very fun. Kai Kamara against his former team. Of course, Kai Kamara scored his 134th goal earlier this week against his former team, too. But this is a fun standings, and Chicago is not out of it. And tonight against Charlotte, if Chicago wins, Chicago is back in the conversation, and we're not talking about them as struggling as much.
Yeah, quickly, I think the Columbus Crew had like a big turkey dinner or something during that weather break midweek, because Montreal didn't even look like they were there, and then suddenly, anyway.
Well, we could just say a couple things. What I noticed too is the opposite strategy. Montreal did not start with their best 11 and slowly but surely introduced a lot of elements at the right time to finish with their best 11. Columbus did the exact opposite. They started with their best 11. They were on a great run of 9-game unbeaten streak, and slowly but surely they were winning 1-0. And they're like, okay, we can play defensively. We got this. And they took some of the players out, and we saw a big difference. And then when Kyoto got on, full of energy against players that were not full of energy, we saw a big difference. And then Alistair Johnston came in, and who would have thought that a Canadian player, a Canadian defender to be precise, but a wingback probably now, comes into the pitch and is offensively the best player for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, look, it was an impressive 10 minutes. I don't necessarily think Montreal wins that game with the weather delay, but we'll never know. It doesn't really matter. They won it. Other quick thought, Pozuelo and Higuain starting to hit a little bit. So watch Miami.
Yep. It's unfortunate that Higuain got subbed out with a concussion and is not necessarily available this weekend. Same for Campana, and they might both be gone for a little bit. So that is unfortunate timing for Miami, but good for Montreal, because Montreal will face Miami tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go. What are we talking about, Chicago? We have the bingo card in the show. I'm gonna add another bingo card element here. We talk about it enough. I think we've talked about it enough. The whole East reminds me of Crabs in the Bucket, the old famous song. You pull them down, and as one climbs up and they get pulled down, and one climbs. That's what's happening in the East. Chicago's up there right now, but eventually they're going to cut the playoff time off, and whatever Crabs at the top of that bucket is going to make the playoffs. I don't think it's going to matter much, because they're going to get killed by Philly or New York.
Yeah. No, it's for sure. And speaking of, Philly's playing Cincinnati tomorrow. We'll see with Cincinnati's, well, not necessarily new look. It's just one player that's gone, but one new player, one player that's gone. There's a couple other moves that happened over the last few hours that we haven't talked about. There's a ton. You can look online to find all your information. Montreal, Miami. That's very fascinating to me. And of course, now the rumor is another rumor. We saw him being subbed out with a concussion. He was dazed and confused. It's a rumored concussion, alleged concussion for Gonzalo Higuain. We'll know more tomorrow or later today when the availabilities of Miami are unveiled. But that could be a good chance for Montreal to make 6 points out of the week. You rescue a win out of the death of the game midweek in the second longest weather delay in Montreal's MLS history. And then, if you turn around to get a win against Miami, that, like Duane is saying, is on the up and up, then you really establish yourself at the higher tier of that standings. And you establish yourself as a team that, yes, hasn't really big stars, but is having one of the best points per game season this year. And if it win Montreal tomorrow, at San Saputo also, it would be 5 games without a loss straight, which is the second longest streak this year. And Montreal is continuing to surprise a lot of the people. And of course, I'm still surprised when I look at the roster on the paper, Duane. And then when I look at the performance, I'm like, okay, but they're playing a system that seems to be working.
I believe, and I've said this a few times this year, that this is the opportunity, 2022 is the opportunity for teams that may not have the bigger budgets to really and truly compete near the top. I think that given another offseason after the World Cup, that you're going to see even more bigger moves into the league, particularly after the World Cup, when a lot of those Europeans that are kind of holding off might make that jump to come over and get a paycheck. Those sort of late 20s guys, you're seeing it already, those moves coming in. The Italian guys in Toronto are a prime example of that. So the 2 years of pandemic dulled this, has given an opportunity for the system teams like New York and Philadelphia to continue on and plug and play and play up-tempo system that allows them to be successful. And you're seeing, teams like Montreal, which just have a consistent element of consistent ability to go and kind of have a long, build some depth and kind of you do it that way, like they have a better opportunity. So my point is, this is the window. You may say in other sports, well, Montreal's can build on this, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, because I think other teams went past them in the offseason. This is their chance to do something this year before Toronto loads up again in the offseason, before Seattle figures it out again, before I know they're on the other side. But you know what I mean in terms of a championship run.
Yeah. And we'll quickly go through the rest of the games because there's 13 games on Saturday. It's like the busiest Saturday I can remember. I don't think there's ever been a Saturday with 13 games because there was not enough teams before last year. And very rarely do you see all teams playing on one day. Vancouver and Houston playing today, and that's the only game that is not taking place on Saturday. So Columbus, NYCFC, Orlando, New England, DC, New York. I'm just going to name them and then I'll ask you what you're looking forward to in this one. Of course, Nashville, Toronto, Kansas City, LA Galaxy, Austin, San Jose, Colorado, Minnesota, late Saturday night, Salt Lake, LAFC, and the last game on the docket is Portland, Dallas. Of course, Nashville, Toronto will get your attention, but which other games tomorrow evening is enticing for you?
Portland, Dallas, to wrap the weekends up, is a pretty decent one. Portland has been playing strong over the past couple of months. They seem to be building up towards a playoff run again, which is Portland's way. Dallas, again, a team that's built solid across the board. Might be a contender in other years. Might have a chance this year and seem to be playing well. So that's certainly an interesting one there. From a different perspective altogether, the Galaxy, Kansas City. I'm curious just how bad Kansas City can possibly get. This is a train wreck of a team right now.
Let's look at the standings just because it's worth it. They're dead last, and they have more games played than points. That is one of the indicators to tell you that you're really having a bad season.
Oh, yeah. No, look. This is, and I heard another podcast talk about Peter Vermees and whether he needs to move upstairs the other day. So it's starting to be beyond us. But let's just make the record out there that we were the OGs when it comes to talking about that.
I've been talking about this for 3 months.
Yeah.
We actually had a full segment on TVA Sport, Duane, when Montreal played Kansas City a few weeks ago. When Montreal lost to Kansas City. But we still had a full segment before that. We interviewed him, but then they were talking. I say we because I was preparing the stats behind it, and they were talking about it. So we were the OGs, and then some mainstream did, and now Extra Time and other places are talking about it. And we'll see if it happens. It's looking more and more like, well, the room may be lost in Kansas City.
Well, look, the show that I heard the other day, it was Allocation Disorder, is where I heard this, was suggesting that maybe he needs stronger voices in his ears to maybe fight against some of the signings that he's made, because
you're saying he's surrounded by yes people?
Yeah, that's essentially what they were saying in between the lines. We don't work directly with these guys at all, so we can just say it outright. Look, you go stale if you're in the same job for too long. And I think anyone, all of us, like I have to move around in my jobs. I have to change my formats. We all do, right? Like computer for me is, he might benefit from some self-reflection and to move upstairs might be in his bed. I know he loves that team and he's obviously going to give it all. And obviously they were close to the Sports Shield race last year. So you can say that and say, well, what about? I would suggest that, again, when you're coming 2 years out of a pandemic, and that really does matter, it's going to change that market. Everything's going to shift forward. And if you're not ready to move with it, you could be in deep trouble. And Kansas City, they've fallen off a cliff this year. I'm not sure I see a pathway back. They do have a couple DPs out. I should mention that. They have some injuries as well.
Exactly. Well, Pulido hasn't been there all season, right? And he's injured and missing the piece. So that's the big piece. But, every team has injury trouble, and it's how you handle them and how you pivot. And there's a lack of pivot. And as Ross would say in Friends, pivot.
Pivot, yes.
Pivot. There's no pivot in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Just like Omar Gonzalez in New England. No pivot.
Join us for 1994 pop culture references consistently here on Soccer Today. We've made Ric Flair, now we've got Friends.
Yeah, it's okay, Duane. You're a little. We're a bit in a different generation, but slowly, finally, my generation's taking over the spots, and it's like I watch retro music. It's all my music. Finally, we made it. We're old enough.
There you go. Yeah, no comment on the music thing. I still listen to 80s and 90s stuff mostly, so there you go.
And I really like that when I tune in my retro channel. It's retro music from the 80s, 90s, and 2000. Like, yes, none of the bad 70s music. Woohoo!
No more Bruce Springsteen or whatever. I don't know.
So
Bruce
I know
anyway.
Yeah, I know. People say classic rock is great. Yeah, it didn't age well. Look at those video clips, and yeah, exactly. It's music video clips.
That's what it is. Yeah, Kansas City though, they're struggling.
True. Speaking of a 70s haircut, Peter Vermees, of course, no offense, but we'll see if that continues. But it has been a bad season for Kansas City as we just take a last look at the Western Conference standings before we say goodbye for today. LAFC is the leader so far in the Supporter Shield race, and the way they're just signing still people every single day, I think there's a new player showing up in LAFC land. Well, they're the favorites, but Austin surprisingly still in the conversation, but they have one more game played. Do you think we'll have a battle for the Supporter Shield, or is it LAFC's to lose?
Well, I think Philadelphia is going to have something to say because Philadelphia plays in the East, and they're going to play a lot of patsies down the stretch, and they have a pretty developed system that's going to win. In fact, I would go so far to say right now, the Philadelphia Union are MLS Cup favorites, not because they're the best team, but because they're going to have the easiest pathway to that final game, and they have the easiest end of the season, which potentially could see them win a Shield. I still think LA is going to win the Shield, but Philadelphia could, and if they do, then yeah, they could absolutely win MLS Cup. But no, in terms of the West, I don't know what to make of Austin. I don't think anyone knows what to make of Austin other than Austin, but you got to give them credit. They keep winning. They had a great start to the season, and they just built upon it is what's happened.
And Driussi is maybe the front runner for MVP. With the amount of goals he's scoring, he's going to be the golden boot, probably, if he continues to score on a regular pace. So, yeah, you're right. Austin is showing us, because they didn't tell us. Nobody knew, but they showed us, and now we know. Austin is a good team, and they will probably be a playoff team, and they'll play at home in their second season in MLS. Not bad.
Yeah, and look, they're going to have a big home advantage down there. They built the team. I liked the way they built the team last year in the expansion year. They didn't have scoring last year. Now they have scoring, and they combine it with that spine that they made last year. You have a decent team. And this is the year of the decent team being the best team. Is it going to last next year? Theme of this show? I don't think so. But you do have the LAFC, which is 1 year ahead of the whole game here. Yeah. And they are the super teams and all that sort of stuff going on. And look, LAFC is fun as hell to watch right now, too. So yeah. I think that I know in league office, they very quietly have the black and gold pom-poms under the table.
And you know what's going to happen, right? You know what's going to happen, right? They're going to lose in their first game of the playoffs. Because that's what usually happens in Major League Soccer.
Well,
Montreal versus like Austin in the final, which will not draw the ratings at all. But you know who predicted Montreal in the final before everybody else?
Yes,
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rare that a team wins the Shield and that does the double. It's 27 teams the last time it happened. I won't bore you with who that was.
Well, you're wearing a shirt that says it, so you don't need to say it. You're wearing it. It's fine.
But before that, it had been 2013, so it doesn't happen a lot. So yeah,
and 2013 was Kansas City, of course, with Aurélien Collin and that team and Zusi and everybody. But on that note, we'll say goodbye for today. And you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Larme, this show at Soccer Today SPN. We'll be back Monday for sure for another episode of Soccer Today, breaking down the weekend and talking about the world of football with a soccer perspective. Until then, you can subscribe to our YouTube page and join our journey to 1,000 subscribers by clicking that subscribe button and that notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast. The podcast, speaking of, is available everywhere you find your favorite podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spreaker, amongst other places. And you can also find our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes for our premium podcast and to subscribe and take part of the shout out tier. But as always, until next time, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Larme, and we wish you a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.